For coming. As I said, this is all about team building, hiring, recruiting, and managing your team to make sure that you get the best out of the people that you work with, or how to help your clients manage their teams so that they can get the most out of the people that they're working with. Shall we start with Edward, face-to-face HR, Streatham Hill?
Thank you so much, Jason. I'm just going to get my presentation up. Thank you so much for attending today. I am going to speak about recruitment and building a team, bearing in mind there's a cost of living crisis. Now, on average, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but on average, it costs around £20,000 to recruit a person. And that consists of the recruitment fees, the management time, the training, and the lost productivity. So now more than ever, it's really important to get it right and get it right the first time. So getting it right, it leads to higher achievement, greater productivity, and increased profit margins. Getting it wrong is really costly, as I've mentioned before, and it uses up so much of management time, and it's a disruption to your team. So what you need to do is define what you need. And in order to do that, you need to ask yourself 3 questions. Number 1, do you need to recruit? It might be the case that due to new technology, distributing work amongst your team, or maybe deciding to outsource the work, that you decide you don't need to recruit at all. Number 2, does the role need changing? You might decide that you want to move it from being a managerial role to being operational, or maybe from full-time to part-time. Number 3, what do other people think? You might want to get a second opinion from the board, from other team members, or perhaps you could even go to a customer or client to get some feedback from them. And also, the exit interview is a really good source of information. So yes, it's all of this that is relevant in terms of getting the right person. So I'm going to go back to basics as far as the recruitment process is concerned. So I know that there's going to be people on this call who are well versed with recruitment, but this is just going to serve as a refresher for you. So first of all, you need to draft a job description, and that gives you an overview of the role and its responsibilities and where it sits within the wider organization. The person spec, it's about more detailed information about the knowledge, the skills and experience that you require for the role. And it's helpful to divide it up into essential and desirable. Next comes the advert. And the job title should really reflect the job that you're advertising. For example, there's no point calling something an executive if it's really an entry-level role. Next is the company information, and this is where you really sell your company. You talk about the mission, the vision, the values, your commitment to sustainability or diversity and inclusion, which I'm going to be speaking about a bit later on. Next is the person spec, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to get a few statements from your already drafted person specification. And then comes reward. And it's so important in a cost of living crisis that you do state what the salary is, or at least a salary range. Making statements such as salary will be attractive or salary will be competitive is just not going to cut it in a cost of living crisis. And also, don't forget non-monetary rewards, things such as flexibility, the ability to work from home, generous holiday, training and development opportunities. And lastly, it's the call to action. What is the application process? When is the closing date? And if possible, when the role starts. Now, I'm not sure about you, but have you been in a situation whereby you've interviewed somebody and you thought that you'd got the right person, but when they started, they just don't fit within the team? And I think disc profiling is perfect. It's really good to try and eliminate that from happening. So what is disc profiling? It's essentially a personality assessment tool, and it identifies behavioral characteristics in terms of 4 factors. That's dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. And for me personally, I've had my profile done and I'm high in terms of steadiness. So I'm literally a steady Eddie. And that's fine because I'm an HR consultant and you need a sort of methodical approach to things. And from the profile, you'll get somebody's preferred communication style, their motivation, and their fears. It's just another piece of information that you could glean in order to get it right first time. So maybe your team is not as productive as it used to be. It's maybe stagnating, and that may be because you're not taking advantage of equality, diversity, and inclusion. Statistics show that teams perform better when they're diverse. Actually, there's a study that was carried out by McKinsey in 2020, which showed that diverse companies are 36% more profitable. So you just can't choose to ignore that during the cost of living crisis. By diversity, I mean race, sex, sexual orientation, disability, the whole gamut. And from a diverse group, you get innovation, creativity, and new perspectives because you're recruiting from a wider talent pool. And it's even better if your group or your team is reflective of your customer base, because then it can lead to insight into marketing and communication. Okay, as I mentioned before, recruitment can be really costly. So it's important that you do a good onboarding to ensure that the employment doesn't fail within the first few months. And I feel like the purpose of an onboarding is for the individual to understand their role and how it sits within the team and within the wider organization. And what I personally do for my clients is I provide them with a onboarding checklist so that they can cover off all the things that you need to get a new starter to know. For example, the policies and the procedures of the organization and the culture. And it's advisable if you meet with your new starter every so often to ensure that you're covering everything off from the checklist. And from that, the team member will be more motivated, they'll be more productive, and they'll be ready to go. And I've got a statistic here that says with a new hire, they're 82% more likely to stay at the company with the good onboarding, sorry. And so it's good for retention purposes as well. So as I mentioned before, your HR documentation should be part of your onboarding process. And for those of you who are on it and you do that anyway, that's fantastic. But for those of you who think, well, I'll just wing it and I won't bother with HR documentation, well, you are putting your business at risk. You need to provide a contract of employment or a written statement of particulars because that outlines the relationship and sets the tone from the start. And you will then be able to set out the terms and conditions of employment. You'll be able to use it as a management tool. And if it's professionally drafted, it does avoid problems in the future. And I do mention it being professionally drafted because I do a free 30-minute review of HR documentation of my clients' documents. And I have seen some real horror stories. I looked at a contract the other day and it said something on the lines of, you are not entitled to have statutory sick pay within the first 12 months of employment. And I was thinking, where did they get that from? I think it must have been a DIY cut and paste job that they did off of the net. And you can never tell whether that's legally compliant or not. So my advice is get somebody professional to look over your contracts. And as far as the employee handbook is concerned, well, if you're sort of running a small family business or you've got 1 or 2 employees, you might not think that an employee handbook is relevant. But as your business grows, you'll need more detailed information about the organization, rules, and expectations of behavior. And the bonuses, of course, as well, is that it avoids discrimination claims. And I should point out that it's part of your legal obligation to ensure that a new employee has a contract of employment on the first day of employment. It used to be 8 weeks, but the law changed recently, so it must be given to the new starter on the first day of employment. So you've done your recruitment process, you have done your onboarding, but it doesn't stop there. It's really beneficial to have a performance appraisal or review process. And it's beneficial to the individual, to the team, and the organization, because you are measuring performance against the company objectives. And in doing so, you are clarifying goals, which enhances performance. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this statistic, but you're 42% more likely to achieve a goal if you write things down. And that goes the same as your employees. And from the performance appraisal, you'll also be able to identify areas of development. And Tina will be speaking about that later with regards to management development in particular. And these days, more of my clients are asking for 360-degree feedback as part of their performance appraisal system. And what that is getting their opinion not only from the line manager, but from other team members as well. And what that's supposed to do is make the whole system, the whole process more transparent. It builds trust and it strengthens bonds between your team members as well. And at this point, it's a really good time to hand over to Mark, because he will be talking about performance management for teams with his platform. So it's over to you, Mark.
Great. Edouard, thank you. Brilliant. Lots of great information in there. I was always one of those managers that tried to buck the system, and HR was always brilliant at slapping my wrist and making sure that I followed through with everything I was supposed to. Why? Because 6 months, 12 months down the road, when it all started to unravel, the paperwork was there to back me up. So yeah, so I'm going to talk about Team Litica. My background is in corporate to start with. I managed big sales teams. I built a team to have around 450 field personnel in the UK and pan-European sales teams as well. So I'm well versed in people management and training and recruitment, all those sorts of things. 20 years ago, I set up my own leadership development company, and since then I've been running courses for corporate clients, and also I do quite a bit in my personal life as well around mountaineering and proper leadership, where if you mess up, things can go badly wrong, and the implications are quite serious. So I've combined all of that, and 3 or 4 years ago, I tried to create something that I was looking to sort of create something that was a foil to psychometric profiling tools. And the reason being is that they all have their place, and I think they're brilliant, but we all work in teams, and I wanted to create something that was entirely team focused, very practical, very pragmatic, common sense. And I built Team Litica. So Team Litica is aimed at any team, any sector, any seniority. It's very easily accessible. I'm going to show you in a second. And the idea is to create data and insights and feedback for the team, because it's by them for them, where they can understand their strengths and weaknesses and then make immediate actions to improve how that team operates and ultimately to improve their productivity and performance. So I'm going to show you it. This is a team that I worked with. It's since disbanded because it was merged with another team. So not that they weren't bad. Actually, this team were high performing. They were a consultancy from a London agency working remote, and they worked in PR and in crisis management. So lots of writing, lots of highly intelligent people, award-winning. The manager's brief to me was, Mark, we can't have another 6 months like we've just had. We've hit all of our targets, but we're about to implode. So I chatted with the team. We sent the questionnaire out, 54 questions, takes about 20 minutes, totally confidential. You can only identify the manager and the team through the results. Everybody else is confidential. As I say, you can't identify them. And the reason being is we want to get good results. So let me show you this particular team and their results. And those on the phone, you're going to struggle to see this. Can you see? Everybody can see your team dashboard? Excellent, good. So the questionnaire went out. 20 minutes later, you get the results back, and it populates a dashboard like this, and every team gets their own dashboard. So there are 3 overall scores: the team's cohesion, stress and morale indicators, and I'll come back to benchmarking in 360, just like Edouard said a few minutes ago. So everything is green, amber, red, as I say, to try and get it as accessible and easy to understand as possible. So I have 9 categories, and it will load. I have rubbish internet where I live, so give it a few moments. Each of the 9 categories has 6 questions. So you have delivery and results, leadership, harmony, trust, stakeholders, capability, energy and morale, accountability, and resilience. So all things that will be recognizable to you. I say each of these has 6 questions, again, all color coded. These just all happen to be amber. So this particular team were brilliant at what they did. And these 6 questions, you've got green, amber, red, so different scores on here. Question 21. As a team, we are well organized and don't spend time firefighting. So the team answers the questions on themselves. There are never individual questions in here. And you can see for this particular question, when this team were allowed to do what they do, i.e. service their customers and write good content, they loved it. Heads down, get on with it, never bother anybody. And they got a score of 8.1, which is great. Now I can click on that and show what I call disparity score. So how the score was made up. So there's an outlier. I don't know who it is because it's confidential. There's an outlier of a 5. You've got 3 7s, an 8, 4 9s, and a 10. So a great cluster. Now, heaven forbid, we're going to ask any of those team members to work cross-functionally, excuse me, or take on new work. This happens. The team approaches all tasks in a calm and constructive manner. They don't. They throw their teddies out the pram and they argue and they moan and they bitch and they do all sorts of things because all they want to do is write for their clients. And I can open this up and see that you've got 2 people scoring 2, which is a really low score, 2 3s and 2 5s. So there's at least 6 people here that fight the system. So I look at this with my coach or trainer or senior leader hat and I go, where's the issue here? Well, actually, I think it's the leader's issue, the manager of this team. They're probably not resource planning effectively. They're not delegating effectively. They're not prioritizing. Actually, they need a bit of discipline in the team. They need to let people know who's boss once in a while and actually get that message across and make sure that the work that's allocated is allocated correctly to the right people. Now, each category does also have insights and actions. So were you to buy this by yourself as a team, you could run this on your team and be given some guidance on how to put that right. So let's look at the manager. We've talked about their style. Let's go look at their results. And if you manage a team currently, let's have a think about what your scores might be. So this manager is brilliant. She is inspirational. She values and listens to people. She's got the skills to do the job. She's unbiased and fair. But look at this. She's very outward facing. So she's brilliant at winning work, speaking at conferences, receiving awards, doing all sorts of things, and being at head office. But we get the right level of support from our leader to achieve our objectives. Only 6.5. So the team don't feel supported despite all of her skills. And when she does support them, or even when she doesn't, we receive clear, concise, and effective communication. So she's not very good at delegating. She's not very good at supporting. And when she does any of that, she's not very good at communicating, which is great because these are skills that can be trained or mentored or coached. So it's very good to highlight these things. The leader, if they're humble and they can take on some feedback and the team want this, then that team can grow because the leader can get better at what they do. And again, there's some insights and actions there as well. So we do that for all 54 questions. All of them can be cross-related. It makes fascinating reading. Now, if you can do this by yourself, or better still, to work with an external coach or trainer who can bring a different dimension to this. Somebody like Tina that can cross-relate between questions and actually get to the nub of the problems, because quite a few of the problems are leader related. So let's go back to the main report. I'm going to say your stress curve now. And for those of you who have not seen a stress curve, this is 100-year-old psychology meant for individuals, but we've tweaked it from a team perspective. So on the left-hand side, you have performance, and on the bottom, you have pressure. So a team will go from apathy and boredom down at the bottom left into comfort, then into performance, optimal performance, top of the curve, where you've got the right level of pressure and the right level of performance. If you do too much, it goes into strain and into burnout. What does strain look like? And I'm sure you're going to recognize this. This is a bit of blame culture. You've got processes not going right. You've got people working longer hours and there's quality going down. There's all sorts of frictions within the team. And actually the role of that external coach or trainer is to look at those processes, and improve processes, and also look at behaviors between team members and possibly the manager as well, and adjust those behaviors to get the team from strain back up on top of that curve into optimal performance. Because if you don't, the more you go into strain, the quicker you go back into it and the longer you stay there. And then you end up into burnout, which people are leaving or they're going off on long-term sick. Hey, and guess who you got to call then? Yep, Edouard. You need her specialist expertise to get you out of that problem and hopefully not have to recruit because you can manage the team. So again, nice and simple. We also look at morale. You've got negative, neutral, positive, gives you an indication of how that team is feeling. Because this is not a big stick tool, we also talk about what the team does really well. So this is how they perceive themselves. So we're proud of the work that we do. Our leader is unbiased and fair. We keep going, we get tough, all great, really good green scores. So this team clearly has its abilities in the right place. Urgent actions. This is the bit where I say, do you know what, you can make changes within 20, 25 minutes of opening a report up. So these are the 3 lowest scoring questions. We've done number 19. So let's have a question 36. We always ask for feedback from our stakeholders. Well, how simple is that to solve? That's 3 or 4 of the team delegated, get into a room, come up with some questions. Let's send it out to our stakeholders and get some feedback. And then let's act upon it. Very simple. And the 3 bottom ones are, I call a disparity score. So the spread of responses. And if we go to question 60, we focus on possibility, not negativity. As you can see there, we've got, open it out. You've got, you've got 2, 4, 5 people that come to work and don't feel happy. So what sort of working environment is that going to create? So within this report as well, we also ask 3 open text questions, which are, what does the team do well? What do the team not do so well? And give me 3 quick wins. So either the team can implement those quick wins straight away, because I'm a great believer that the answers lie within the team, or you can get your external help to come in and solve some of those problems. Now, once you've got your report, you've got your data, you've got your action plan, let's create that with either the internal management or with somebody externally and create immediate short wins and quicker wins and then longer term wins into a development plan. Once you've implemented that and it's now say 3 or 6 months later, guess what you can do? You can come back and retest. So this is a different team. This is a mock-up, this particular one. So what you see now is a different dashboard, but at the bottom here, you've got benchmarking and 360. So you can send the same questionnaire to key stakeholders to get a comparison score, or you can come back and do a benchmark. And if you do a benchmark, you can then do this. You have a date range. So I'm going to pick one date range from here and one date range from there, and then it enables you to do this. You can benchmark any of your scores against any of the questionnaires that you've done. And although this is a mock-up, you will see that question 19, that calmness now prevails. We've gone from a score of 5 to a score of 9. So what you're able to do is demonstrate back to the team that they're progressing. And if you're an external coach or trainer, you can also then show return on investment. So that is a report, and there's a little bit coming down the line, which is looks at multiple teams. So you can compare and contrast multiple teams on the same pages and look for either shared training opportunities or best practice teams. And just as a quick plug, the 54 questions, these are problems that every team has. And over the next 12 months, we're going to do 1 problem a week. I'm going to do a live broadcast on LinkedIn. So if you want to check out solutions to the problems that are highlighted within the report and you want to benefit from them yourself or know others that can, then hopefully you'll tune in. So that's Mark, Team Litica. I now have the pleasure of introducing Tina, who will take you through training and all things managers. Thanks for your time.
There you go. Presenter makes the mute error. There you go. How good's that? Okay, so I'm just going to start showing my screen. Well, let's hope this goes okay. Can everybody see team building, how to get the best out of your team? Cool. Thank you very much. So Edouard and Mark have already given us some really good information. You've successfully recruited someone to your team. Maybe you've got a whole new team, or maybe you're making just tweak to an existing one. And you've run Mark's system so that you've had your team analysed and you understand that, you know, what next? I think initially, as Mark's already said, if you look at the Team Litica reports, you should be able to find some quick wins, something that you can implement quickly that will have a positive impact and start enthusing the team. So that's really great. But I think it's also important that you have to understand what it is that a successful team needs. And it's going to be things like good communication, which is safe and open. There's going to have to be some agreed shared goals. You've got to have trust within the team. If you haven't got trust, it's not going to work as a high-performing team. Appreciating the strengths that each of those team members have, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that later. The ability to grow, diversity, which Edward's already talked about, values that shared and agreed amongst the team, supporting each other. You have to have that support network within the team. And then there's feedback, which Edward's already talked about. You need energy within your team, and you also need consistency. But, you know, why bother? Is it actually worth investing in your team so that you've got a high functioning team? And the answer is yes. And I've got some wonderful statistics to show you to prove the point. So the benefits of a high performing team: if you've got strong team bonds, it helps create oxytocin, which creates happy people. And happy people are 20% more productive than their unhappy colleagues. Also, if you're acknowledging people's strengths and valuing their strengths within the team, it can bring individual absenteeism down by 41%, which is a significant number. But across the whole team, it can also reduce staff turnover by 24%. Now, Edward's already talked about diversity and the benefits of having a team that's got a range of ages, genders, ethnicity, and everything else. And she has already mentioned the fact that these teams can be up to 36% more productive than their uniform counterparts. I find this one quite interesting. If your team collaborates on a task, they're likely to stick at that task for 64% longer than somebody working in isolation. Now, this one's the biggie for me. 94% of people say they would stay at an organization for longer if that organization invested in them and helped them to learn. Well, that's where I come in. So from this, you can see that an organization needs to maintain, develop, and grow its teams in order to maximize all those benefits. I suppose one of the ways you can look at it is kind of think of your team like a garden. You're going to spend a lot of time and investment getting it just right, just the way you want. But if you neglect that garden, the weeds are going to come back, and it's going to be the same with teams. I kind of had a bit of a debate with myself to start with as to whether maintain or develop should come first in the list. And I think it depends on what stage your team is at. If you've already got a well-established, strong team, then you're going to be looking at maintenance. But if you've got some skills gaps, you're going to want to prioritize development first and then move into maintenance when everything's in place. It's going to sound obvious, but every team member has responsibility as far as team maintenance goes. You may choose to formally identify people's strengths and personality traits using the DISC analysis that Edouard mentioned earlier. Or you just may work amongst yourselves and identify what people are good at. So you might decide that actually, do you know what, Janet's really good at keeping people on track and making them accountable. Jeff's the data guru, and Alex is brilliant at customer service. Either way, I think it's really important that everyone understands and appreciates their own talents and strengths and those of the rest of the team. Now, having said that it's important and everyone has their role to play, the manager plays a key role in keeping the team on track. In fact, a manager can make or break a team. They have to be a really good communicator, a role model that brings enthusiasm and energy to the team, and they have to behave in accordance with the shared values. So this is something that you need to bear in mind and make sure that they can deal with difficult people and situations confidently. So moving on to developing. In this context, what I'm talking about is addressing those lack of skills across the team where they have a direct impact on whether the team can achieve its goals to the highest standard. Now, if you've been working with HR and if you've been using Mark's system, then there's a good chance you'll know what those skills gaps are already. And then you can agree with the team the best way for them to be addressed. Now, I think it's really important that the team are involved in this development process, because if somebody comes up with a proposal that don't agree with, then they're not going to engage and commit to it. Something that can happen as well while you're sort of maintaining and developing your teams is conflict. Now, there are different types of conflict, and actually I would suggest some of them are good, and you would encourage them. For example, the ability to debate differing ideas and opinions. It has to be well managed and it has to be kept on a professional level. But this sort of conflict can result in really broad ideas and stronger decisions. However, if conflict is undermining the team through, I don't know, personality clashes or bullying and harassment, then that needs to be dealt with immediately. And it's usually incumbent on the manager to make sure it's addressed. If you treat it as a priority, then it reinforces the values of the team and it demonstrates consistency. And this is one area where I would definitely recommend you get some external training support. So moving on to growth. Now, with this respect, development was about the team skills. This is about individual skills and what their needs are, and they may extend beyond what the team needs and reflect more their ambitions. So a part of everybody's development plan needs to work towards these goals and identify how to achieve them. And this is also a great opportunity for starting succession planning within your team and within the wider organisation. In order for development and growth to properly work, I think Mark's already mentioned it, you do need a no blame culture. People have got to be allowed to make mistakes. I mean, you know, it's inevitable if somebody's learning and growing. What's important is that you've got in place structures so that if this does happen, you can understand why the mistake occurred and how you learn from it. But how do you bring on the development and the growth of individuals? Well, there are a few options. Some of them are internal and informal, things like shadowing, coaching, mentoring, or delegation. But there are also external options. For example, you could use conferences or trade events or secondments or external training. And these have the added benefit of bringing a broader range of knowledge and skills and expertise. What we do at Avantina is we work with organisations and managers to analyse the different individuals' skills, show them how their role fits in with the team, and then identify any areas that they might want to consider for development. Particularly passionate about working with those who are new to management or new team leaders, because the changing role there brings with it some specific challenges. Our goal is to make sure that all managers have the skills and confidence they need so that they, the team, and the business can reap all the benefits we've been talking about this morning. So the increased productivity, the higher staff engagement, the reduced absenteeism, and the lower staff turnover, which all come from having those good, high-performing teams. So, as Mark's already said, once you've got everything in place, your team's running smoothly, reuse his system so that you can test and document and demonstrate the improvements that have been made. If you've got a longer time and when you're going to be building your team, you might want to do those retests periodically and then report back to everyone as things go along. So, you can see we've now come full circle, because even with the most successful teams, individuals are going to grow and move on. Now, that might be in line with your succession planning, but it also might be to another organisation. Now, Edouard mentioned about having a supportive onboarding process before. I think you also need a fit for purpose offboarding process, which is going to make it much easier for the individual, the team, and the organisation. Initially in these situations, see what you can do internally. Are there any people within your team, within the wider organisation that you can promote? In a perfect world, you'd promote as much as you could within your organisation and then recruit right back down at the lowest level and do that externally. So I think we've demonstrated this morning that there are different elements to building and maintaining a successful team. We've all got our own parts to play, and I hope you found it really useful. Back over to you, Jason.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'm sure everybody here thinks that the presentations have been great. 3 takeaways from each of you. I don't mean McDonald's or KFC. Edward.
Three takeaways, right? Number one, recruit and try and get it right the first time. And then number two is the onboarding and following up. Number three, performance management in order to build and retain your team.
Mark.
Managers need to be humble. First off, they need to learn and grow. Second, your solutions for whatever they are lie within the team. They know stuff, and you got to be a good leader and get that out. And third, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So that's why I built Teamlytica.
Yeah.
I'll chip in with mine now. I think it's always important important to continue to invest in your team, but it doesn't have to cost you lots of money. And we mentioned the internal options there, and I would strongly recommend delegation, which empowers the individual but also provides the team with resilience. No matter how busy or how tight things are, keep your team communication live, current and frequent, so team meetings and one-to-ones. And I think the last one, from a rather selfish point of view, but it is key to the whole team, is continue to invest in your managers.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? Or somebody's got to have a question, really.
Well, I missed it. Hi, Jason. I missed most of it. I didn't even know this was on. So if I can get a copy of the recording, that'll be great.
No, it will be on the YouTube channel. Everybody will be, we will be linking you, offering you a link to Mark, Tina and Edward. But is anybody having a question at the moment?
Not question, but I do have a comment, Jason, that teams, especially the top management, they need to be very inclusive about their team members, and they shouldn't abandon their members at any point. And when they leave behind one person or other person for any reason, there is no way that you're going to have a good collaboration between teams, and it eventually returns in a bad thing for your own organization's structure, your own organization's benefit, productivity, and everything.
Okay, so does Edward, Tina or Mark want to bring this point?
Yeah, so a great statement. I'm a believer that we all have something to contribute in a team, and if they're recruited correctly, they are onboarded correctly and supported and trained correctly, then the company should give them and the leader should give them every opportunity to fulfill their role. And if they don't, then let's help them do it. And I'm also a great believer that if they get to a disciplinary stage or performance review, it tends to be the manager's fault or the company's fault because they haven't supported or haven't recruited properly in the first place, or supported or managed them effectively. Clearly, there are some bad apples in a team, but you're right. Bringing people along with them and making sure everybody contributes to a high level is really important.
Edward?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Edward, do you have anything to say on this?
No, I think Mark's covered most of it. Obviously, HR has a really important role to play in recruiting and onboarding and making sure that employees get the development that they require in order to be able to make that contribution as a valued team member. So I really do agree with what Simon was saying.
Tina?
Yeah, I was just going to say that actually, I think sometimes, I don't know if it's arrogance or whatever, but the senior members may think, well, what can you know? You're just a new member of staff or whatever, but you don't know what that person's background or understanding is. And if they're a lot closer to the business, they might have a better understanding than you anyway. So I think it's always important to make sure that at whatever level of the organization are, you have that ability to contribute to discussions and make suggestions.
Yeah, I believe if somebody is in a team, he is very much capable of contributing something. And
Absolutely.
And when you are somehow ignoring any members for any reason, you are yourself making sure that your team is no longer a team. and you have broken that chain that makes it a team and makes it a vibrant one for the organization.
Tina, Sarah's Sarah or Sarah?
Sarah.
Thank you.
Sarah,
Sarah is there.
Tina, Sarah's asked about the training that Aventia offers. Could you just give her a little bit of an outline?
Sure. I mean, it depends on what the individual organisation wants. So although if you go onto my website, you'll see, oh, I do a course on this and I do a course on that. I will always liaise with the organisation to find out what it is they actually need and whether I can meet their needs. So we will look at the different skills on offer. We can either do face-to-face, we can do virtual. I always try and get engaging activities in there to get the people involved. I mean, basically, I'm lazy. If I can get the candidates to do most of the work, that's great. But also, it means they learn more if they're taking part. And so it does depend. I mean, as far as new managers goes, I'm hoping to launch very soon a course specifically for them, which will take them through all the challenges and changes that they will have when they become new managers, and then help them understand what their role actually is and what they need to do, and then identify any development that they may need, which they can then train with me, or they can take and train with someone else. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, look, I was thinking about doing some breakout rooms, but the young lady that works in my office that does all of that is not well today, and I'm so used to this stuff. So you're just going to have to put up with it. Ricky, you asked a question.
Wouldn't go that far. I'd say it was more a statement. I think that what we've seen so far is a really, really good demonstration to deal with what's called cog management. And cog management is where you've got a job that wants doing and you just put a body into it and manage the cog to do what they're doing. And you don't take into effect their personality, their needs and their performance to maximize their potential. And instead, all you're doing is waterfall management and minute micromanaging. So between the three placements that you've got here, you're recruiting the right people with the right attitude at the right time. You're checking and making sure that the team is sitting there and sort of how they feel and reacting and working with that. And then you're just really digging in to maximize that potential and working with each body that you've got in place to make their best way of doing it. I'm as dyslexic as it's possible to be and string a sentence together, and I wouldn't have the role I have in the bank if it wasn't for the fact that my boss is willing to make the adjustments for me beyond the normal cog mandate that I would have been in many other roles in my lifetime. And I have a massive effect in my role, but it wouldn't be that case if I was just managed like a cog. That's it.
Would you be
I
prepared
think-
to talk about this further?
Always.
Yeah. Okay, so the next time round, will you join these people in helping other companies? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else have another question? I know we're all busy.
Yeah, I've got one if I may, Jason.
Yeah.
There's one for Edouard. So onboarding and bad onboarding is a real kind of pet hate of mine. What would you say does good onboarding look like?
Well, good onboarding can start before the person's even joined the business, and you can get information about the company and the culture to them even before they start.
Yeah.
And of course, it's all of the basics in terms of documentation, the policies and procedures. That's the formalities, but it's also about the culture of the organization as well, and what the organization stands for. So there's different layers of the onboarding, at the organizational level, the team level, and with the line manager. And so many times in the first few months of employment, managers don't meet with the new starter enough. And it gets to the end, the probation, and they're thinking, oh, I'm not sure about this person. But have you really invested that time in having those one-to-ones and really allowing them to become familiar, not only with their role, but the wider organization as well? So I talked about induction checklists, and I can bespoke that to the company as well.
Great, thanks.
Anybody else?
I've got a quick question. So Mark, through this process that you take people through, have there ever been any times where it hasn't worked, where it's shown a certain response, but it's a false response because that person's been quite cute in how they've answered the questions?
Do you know, that's a great question. It doesn't tend to happen if the leader hasn't had buy-in. So if this is imposed on the leader or the manager of that team, there's a reluctance there already. And as I alluded to, the vast majority of issues in a team are actually around the leadership and how that team is managed or led or trained or supported or whatever it might be. So the leader always need to look at themselves first. I don't have any specific examples because I tend to work one-to-one with the team once they've done the assessment. So I get to uncover that with the team. And if necessary, I'll chat to the team as well, to try and get to the bottom, the root cause of what those issues are. But and then the report becomes a guidance. But once you've got data, it's really hard for a manager or the team to go, well, that's not correct. When you go, well, they're your scores. It's what you've reported on. So, and also if things are too good or too bad. The beauty of the multi-team is that, which is shortly it's in development now, is that it's still the perception of the team. So by doing your 360 on the team, their reality might be, we're brilliant. Whereas everybody else thinks, well, actually not quite as good. So that gap analysis between scores becomes very effective.
Okay, can I ask a question? Edward, Tina, Mark, how much does the boss impede on the growth of the business?
I think the boss has a massive impact on the team and the business, and especially middle managers. I mean, there's various surveys and what have you, that when people are leaving organizations and they're asked about the main reason for them leaving, a good number of them will cite bad line management as the main reason for leaving. So having a manager who can meet the needs of the team without dominating it, which I think is another good point. You don't want a manager who, the team's all about them, is absolutely crucial.
I got a great story. So this US Navy SEALs, I follow a guy called Jocko Willink, and he writes management books now. Very good. Anyway, he tells a story of trying to get into US Special Forces, these Navy SEALs, and they carry boats. So they're in teams, they're competing, it's cold, it's wet, it's miserable, and they've been out for days, and they're all knackered. So they're carrying these really big, heavy boats as teams. And what they do is they take the winning team, or the ones that are at the top end of the spectrum, and the bottom, and they switch leaders. So what happens? The leader that was at the bottom, who is failing, now joins a really good team. So their belief in themselves steps up. And the leader that was in the winning team now moves to the bottom team, and the bottom team suddenly has belief in themselves because they're being led by a really good manager. And what happens is both teams rise up and then compete against each other and do really well. So leadership is absolutely critical to the success of any team, and attitude and belief as well.
Yes.
Edward?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, when a new starter joins a team, the line manager is crucial in that onboarding process, and it can't be delegated to somebody else, even though other people should be involved in the onboarding process. But it's cyclical, it starts off with the onboarding, then it's, the maintenance, the regular team meetings. And of course, the performance appraisal is really crucial as well, in terms of the line manager assessing performance and doing that in a fair manner, so that the individual feels that they are recognized, and so that if there are areas of development, then you can identify that as well. So it really is a cyclical thing, and I think that Tina is great for management development, because what I found through working in HR is that there is a focus on people who are experts just being promoted into a managerial role, without having the necessary training on how to become a line manager. And we need more management development as well.
That's very, very true. I'm going to completely support. That's why my passion is to support those new managers, because everyone's got the skills, but they're perhaps not aware of it. It's just bringing them out. Any other questions?
No, really, you guys are all meant to be the managers here. I'm just the host. Do we have any other questions? John Davis, you're looking confused.
Oh no, I'm all good. I'm just listening.
Do you have anything
Good.
to say?
Well, I was just fascinated by by Mark's presentation. There, I was, whilst you were talking, I'd had a look at Team Hospital's website, so I was actually just having a look at that as well. So yeah, I'm interested in everything that anybody said. I don't actually have any specific questions as such.
I've got another question. So with issues around diversity now, how does that fall into what you suggest, Edward, as an HR consultant, and for you for training? How have you had to adjust to accommodate diversity within businesses as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. As I said in my presentation, it's something that businesses can't ignore now, because the statistics show that teams perform better when they're diverse. And it's not just about an obligation, you know, to ensure that you comply with legislation. It's just there's a business case for diversity. And so even when I'm talking to small businesses, it's not just an issue for larger businesses, it's for small businesses as well. And I think that the cost of living crisis presents an opportunity for businesses to recruit from a widened talent pool. And I do get requests from companies for diversity and inclusion training, because managers are not necessarily well versed in what they need to do in order to recruit and to support diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So that is something that I offer as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think it might seem comfortable when you're interviewing people, if you see some similarities and you go, oh, I can relate to this person, and therefore they're going to be good for the team because we're going to agree. And actually, you don't want a team full of people who are going to agree with you. You want a team for exactly the reasons that Edouard says about improving business, because they're going to challenge. Like I was saying in my presentation, it needs to be managed well, but you're going to have some really good debates and discussions about differing opinions. And also Edouard mentioned in her presentation about if your company reflects your customer base, you're much more likely to provide products or services that are going to meet their needs. So there's definitely, a business argument for it. It isn't about ticking boxes about, whether you've employed the right number of women or, whatever it is. There is actually a business argument for it. And I think you need to have that in mind when you're going through that recruitment process, or even if you're not recruiting, if you're doing a particular project and maybe you're getting some consultants in, somebody who is going to have that different opinion, who's going to challenge, because you're going to come out with so much stronger decisions as a result of it. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions at the moment? No? Hello? No?
All good. I'm good.
Okay, everybody's good. If it's okay with everybody, we're going to post this on YouTube and share it with everybody that was here today. If you want to contact Edouard, Tina, or Mark, please let me know and I will make the introductions. If you would like to be involved in any of the future events that we're doing, contact one of us. And if any of us can help you, we are here for you, all right?
Definitely.
And thank you for your time. Thank you for turning up.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody.
I hope you got some use out of it.
Yeah. Thank you everybody for coming today. We're really appreciative, and Tina, Edward and Mark are very, very happy that you took the time to listen to them, and hopefully they can help you in your business in future, right?
Cheers, everybody.
Yep.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you
Jessica,
very
for
much.
hosting.